Do you know when my favourite era of film is? 80s and 90s. And most people will probably say, well, of course it is. It's your childhood. Your choice is dictated by nostalgia. And to a certain degree, they're probably right. But it's not just that. Things were very different then to what they are now. And one of those reasons was the mighty VHS tape. You see, for the first time, people were now able to watch movies at home. And although very expensive at first, they soon come down in price, but also opened up a whole new market. Rentals. If you couldn't afford a VHS player, no problem. Rent one from Radio Rentals. And if you couldn't afford the tapes, no problem. Rent them out from your local video store. But of course, in order to start a home video market, you needed to create something people could watch at home. And this, in my opinion, is why this era was so good. Much like now with streaming, there was a huge demand for new films, and also a huge potential for money to be made. And so we saw the rise of not only lots of little straight-to-video companies, but also lots of original ideas. Things were getting green-lit no matter how wacky they were. This was the birth of the B-movie. And unlike the big, hulking blockbuster films at the cinema, these could take a risk because there was such demand for home video. Straight-to-video was great for sci-fi and horror, to name a few. But let's not forget all those martial arts films as well. You see, now you had a whole new type of movie star. You had the B-movie star. And during this time period, you'd probably see these guys in things more than the top stars. We got the likes of Sybil Danning and Christopher Lambert to Rutger Hauer and Peter Weller. Now, I know what you're saying. They were mainstream. And yeah, you're right. But they weren't always mainstream. They all started on B-movies and even went back to them later in life. This was what made this period of time so special to me. No idea was off the table because if it couldn't be made as a blockbuster, it could be a B-movie. It created competition, and competition is good. It forces creativity. And man, did we get that. If it wasn't time-travelling DeLoreans and men in overalls catching ghosts in the blockbuster movies, it was a teenage boy stealing an F-16, or men fighting in giant robot suits in the home video market. VHS rentals came at a great time. Jobs were few and strikes were happening everywhere. No one could afford a night out, so instead of a couple at the local pub and then a trip to the cinema, people were opting for a couple of cans and a VHS rental. And this became a mainstay for a lot of families during the 80s. I remember my older sister renting a film for herself and then one that me and my brother could watch, and we would watch them at least twice in the 3 days that we had them for. I have great memories of watching Beetlejuice, Who Framed Roger Rabbit on rental, to name a few. Going to the video store became a treat in itself, running down the aisles looking at all those big box covers and deciding what you was going to take a risk on. And it really was a risk, as you didn't know if it was going to be any good, and you could be stuck with a real stinker for 3 days. This was what made it fun, because you just didn't know. I'm convinced if it wasn't for this time period, we never would have got Paul Verhoeven films. They were so close to the wire with their satire and gore. But during this time, you could make edgy films. People could push the envelope, and that always sparks creativity. It was a different time. Unlike now, where studios won't take a risk and everything is a DEI sequel or reboot. The 80s and 90s were so good for film. So many great titles that I couldn't possibly name them all. But I can tell you this, I own a lot of them. And I'm always going back to watch them. So I'll tell you what, Hollywood, you keep your 400 million CGI, DEI clusterfuck of a reboot, and I'll stick with the original 80s, 90s, practical effects masterpiece that you're just trying to copy.